according to recent demographic data published by the United States Census Bureau. The silver divorce rate, which specifically tracks divorces among adults over the age of 50, has roughly doubled since the early 1990s. Even more startling to socioeconomists is the data exploring adults over the age of 65, where the divorce rate has officially tripled over the same period. At the exact same time, a multi-billion-dollar grey dating and matchmaking industry aggressively targets older demographics, spending massive advertising budgets to push a single, idealized narrative that finding a new romantic partner in your golden years is the ultimate non-negotiable key to health, happiness, and longevity. But when you strip away the heartwarming marketing campaigns, look past the heavily edited stock imagery, and deeply analyze the cold empirical data compiled by financial institutions, family courts, and public health researchers, a completely different and far more troubling reality emerges. Entering a serious romantic relationship, establishing a domestic partnership, or remarrying after the age of 60 carries an extraordinary, often catastrophic, set of hidden costs that traditional financial planners, well-meaning family members, and relationship counselors almost never bring to light. Today, we're going to perform an exhaustive, data-driven investigation into what the research actually reveals about late-life romance. We will mathematically break down the structural financial risks, the asymmetric health and caregiving burdens, the legal traps of asset erosion, and the statistical realities of estate fragmentation that occur when mature adults try to force their established lives into a relationship model originally designed for young people starting from scratch. If you are currently single, divorced, or widowed and are navigating the modern dating market, or if you are simply trying to insulate your hard-earned Hewtree portfolio from catastrophic late-stage risk, what you are about to hear is an absolute data-backed economic necessity. To fully comprehend the massive scope of the hidden costs of love after 60, we must first establish the profound, unyielding mathematical difference between a relationship formed at age 25 versus one initiated at age 65. When two individuals enter a partnership in their 20s, they are typically starting at a financial baseline of near zero. They build their wealth together, they compound their assets simultaneously, they purchase real estate as a joint venture, and they share an identical long-term economic runway spanning 40 or 50 years. In that youthful scenario, any financial mistakes can be mitigated by decades of future earning potential. However, by the time an individual reaches 60 or 65, a romantic relationship is no longer a joint venture of wealth creation. Instead, it is a complex, high-risk institutional merger of two entirely separate, fully mature financial ecosystems. Each ecosystem comes loaded with its own historical liabilities, credit scores, debt structures, real estate holdings, tax brackets, and multi-generational family obligations, including adult children and grandchildren. When you invite a new romantic partner into your life at this advanced stage, you're not merely inviting a companion into your home. From a purely mathematical and legal standpoint, you're opening your entire life savings and your balance sheet to a massive array of unquantifiable volatile variables that can permanently destabilize your retirement security within a matter of months. Let us look directly at the most devastating economic phenomenon identified by late-life wealth managers, which is late-stage asset erosion and the structural collapse of compounding efficiency. For a mature individual in their 60s or 70s, your net worth is not an abstract scoreboard or a luxury metric. It is your literal life support system. It defines the hard boundaries of your personal freedom, your physical safety, your access to premium medical treatments, and your capacity to live out the remainder of your life without the constant grinding anxiety of economic scarcity. Yet, quantitative data from family law courts indicates that a grey divorce or the legal dissolution of a late-life domestic partnership decimates an individual's accumulated wealth by an average of 50%. If you experience a severe financial loss or a messy divorce in your 20s or 30s, you still possess a multi-decade career runway to return to the labour market, retrain, reinvest, and completely rebuild your capital. If you absorb that same 50% financial shock at 65 or 70, your rebuilding capacity is functionally non-existent. You are forced to take a catastrophic hit to your principal capital at the exact moment when you are transitioning out of active employment and into the distribution phase of your wealth. The data demonstrates that the pure structural cost of a failed late-life relationship routinely pushes previously wealthy, upper-middle-class retirees into permanent financial vulnerability, forcing them to radically downsize their lifestyle or rely on state assistance. But this economic strain is rarely limited to the obvious, highly visible expenses of family court attorneys, legal mediators, and formal asset division. A far more insidious day-to-day financial drain revealed by socioeconomic studies is what wealth managers term lifestyle cross-subsidization and structural generational drain. When two mature individuals unite later in life, their financial configurations are almost never perfectly symmetrical. Statistically, one partner frequently possesses a substantially larger retirement portfolio, a superior pension, or highly stable real estate equity, while the other partner may enter the relationship with an underfunded retirement account, outstanding consumer debts, low social security benefits, or ongoing financial obligations to their own extended family. Over a prolonged timeline, the wealthier partner quietly, almost imperceptibly, begins to absorb the daily operational costs of the other person's existence. This is not just a matter of treating them to high-end dinners, paying for international vacations, or upgrading consumer electronics. It manifests as the slow, continuous, systemic draining of your monthly discretionary cash flow to maintain a dual standard of living that your personal financial portfolio was never historically modelled to support. You find yourself spending your principal, or accelerating your retirement account withdrawals, not to fund your own longevity, but to underwrite the consumer lifestyle and basic upkeep of a second individual whose financial planning prior to meeting you was suboptimal. Furthermore, when we look at the data regarding adult children and multi-generational family dynamics, we uncover an immense element of financial and legal volatility. A comprehensive study on intergenerational wealth transfer and late-life domestic partnerships found that late-life remarriages or long-term cohabitation arrangements frequently trigger intense, bitter, and systemic conflicts regarding estate planning and inheritance. Adult children from previous marriages almost universally view a parent's new romantic partner as a direct, existential threat to their structural inheritance and the preservation of family legacy assets. This structural tension frequently leads to toxic family dynamics, psychological warfare, alienation, and ultimately incredibly expensive estate litigation that can ties up wealth in probate courts for years after an individual passes away. Additionally, the economic data reveals that if your new partner's adult children or grandchildren experience personal financial crises, such as job losses, business bankruptcies, medical emergencies, substance abuse issues, or divorces, your household capital is very often quietly reallocated to solve these external dilemmas. You suddenly find your hard-earned retirement savings, the money you sacrificed your youth to accumulate, being deployed as an emergency credit line or a non-repayable bailout for individuals to whom you have no biological connection and whom you have only known for a tiny fraction of your life. This unmodeled generational drain completely disrupts your long-term capital preservation strategies, accelerating the depletion of your funds and leaving you exposed to late-life poverty. Now let us transition away from the balance sheet and examine the extraordinarily stark medical, psychological, and caregiving asymmetries that public health data exposes. The mainstream cultural myth surrounding late-life romance constantly promises that a romantic partner will act as your built-in, dedicated caregiver as you navigate the inevitable physical and cognitive declines of aging. However, when we look at epidemiological data compiled by the Institute on Aging and the National Alliance for Caregiving, we uncover an incredibly severe gender, age, and biological imbalance in this equation. Statistically, because women possess a significantly longer biological life expectancy than men by several years, and because men historically tend to pursue chronologically younger female partners, older men are statistically far more likely to receive spousal caregiving at the end of their lives, while older women are overwhelmingly predisposed to become unpaid, highly stressed elder caregivers. But if an older man enters a new relationship with an older partner later in life, the probability of mutual simultaneous health decline introduces a massive double liability to the household. Medical data shows that performing intensive physical and emotional caregiving for an ailing spouse or domestic partner in your 60s, 70s, or 80s is one of the most destructive, physically damaging, and psychologically crushing forms of labour a human being can endure. The caregiver partner in a late-life relationship routinely suffers from chronic sleep deprivation, severe immune system suppression, high clinical anxiety, and a dramatic measurable acceleration of their own biological aging process. In fact, public health statistics indicate that elderly caregivers between the ages of 60, and from a statistical standpoint, 72 who are managing a chronically ill partner experience a staggering 63% higher mortality rate than non-caregiving individuals within the exact same age bracket. When you make the conscious decision to enter a serious romantic relationship or a shared household after the age of 60, you are signing an invisible, yet legally and emotionally binding contract to potentially convert your golden years of hard-earned peace, leisure, global travel, and creative freedom into a full-time, uncompensated, grueling institutional nursing role for a person you did not raise, did not build a youthful life with, and have only known for a brief window of time. You are actively trading away your personal health runway, your cognitive energy, and your physical longevity to underwrite and absorb the medical vulnerabilities, chronic illnesses, and genetic liabilities of another individual. let us look at another profoundly hidden dimension that sociological data continuously highlights, which is the systemic destruction of existing social capital and the severe restriction of personal autonomy. Sociological research tracking the long-term lifestyle habits of single retirees versus coupled retirees reveals an unexpected paradox. Individuals who live in intentional singlehood after 60 actually maintain substantially more robust, diverse, deeply embedded and resilient social safety networks than those in couples. When an older adult enters a new, high-intensity romantic relationship, they almost universally undergo a psychological process known as social consolidation or dyadic withdrawal. They voluntarily pull back from their broader community, they reduce the frequency of their interactions with lifelong friends, they stop attending community groups, and they scale back their involvement with their own extended biological family to invest almost the entirety of their limited time and emotional energy into the new partnership. However, the statistical data shows that if that late-life relationship inevitably fails, or when that romantic partner inevitably undergoes cognitive decline or passes away, the remaining individual finds themselves plunged into a state of severe, profound, and life-threatening isolation because their original foundational social infrastructure has completely atrophied from years of chronic neglect. Single retirees, by contrast, are structurally forced by their circumstances to build and actively maintain an expansive, intentional network of high-quality friendships, peer support systems, neighborhood alliances, and community engagements. They do not foolishly rely on a single human being to validate their psychological existence or satisfy their social needs. Their emotional capital is highly diversified across a wide spectrum of reliable relationships, making them far more psychologically resilient to the inevitable shocks, losses, and health transitions associated with the aging process. The data also reveals an extraordinary, undeniable truth regarding personal autonomy and time allocation. Time is the absolute ultimate non-renewable asset in your 60s and 70s. The remaining years of high-quality, high-energy cognitive sharpness and physical mobility are strictly finite and shrinking with every passing hour. Time use surveys conducted by social scientists among aging populations demonstrate that single individuals spend a significantly higher percentage of their daily hours engaging in deep personal hobbies, pursuing advanced educational interests, volunteering for causes they care about, traveling to niche international destinations of their own absolute choosing, and participating in rigorous physical fitness activities that extend their health span. Coupled individuals, conversely, spend an immense disproportionate percentage of their daily lives engaged in what researchers categorize as relationship maintenance. This involves navigating complex interpersonal compromises, resolving petty domestic frictions, coordinating highly conflicting daily schedules, managing the emotional anxieties and moods of their partner, and attending social obligations for individuals they do not particularly respect or care about. The sheer volume of vital, irreplaceable life force and cognitive energy consumed just to keep a late-life partnership stable and peaceful represents an immense, unjustifiable opportunity cost. It is precious energy that could have been directly reinvested into your own cardiovascular health, your creative legacy projects, your intellectual growth, or your absolute psychological tranquility. Let us look closely at the housing market, real estate liabilities, and the geographic restrictions that late-life relationships systematically impose on mature individuals. In your retirement years, geographic flexibility is one of the most powerful financial and lifestyle assets you can possibly possess. You may want to downsize your real estate portfolio to unlock massive amounts of trapped equity, relocate to a state or country with a significantly lower tax burden, or spend 6 months of the year living in a completely different climate to support your respiratory or joint health. When you're intentionally single, these complex life transitions are entirely frictionless. You analyze the economic data, you look at your personal budget, you consult your financial advisor, and you execute the move with absolute speed and decisiveness. The exact moment you introduce a romantic partner into your residential equation, your geographic mobility drops to near zero. You're now structurally anchored by their specific medical preferences, their proximity to their own adult children and grandchildren, their intense psychological attachment to a specific piece of real estate or neighborhood, and their deeply ingrained personal comfort zones. You frequently find yourself trapped in an oversized, high-maintenance suburban home with soaring property taxes, or stuck in an unfavorable, high-tax jurisdiction simply because executing a logical relocation would cause an unsustainable amount of relationship friction or emotional drama. You're actively sacrificing your structural financial flexibility, your tax efficiency, and your geographic freedom to accommodate a domestic ecosystem that does not serve your personal longevity or your wealth preservation. We must also critically analyze the powerful cultural, corporate, and psychological manipulation that systematically drives mature adults toward these highly risky economic and emotional arrangements. Modern society utilizes the fear of loneliness as a highly coordinated psychological weapon to enforce social conformity across all age groups, but particularly among seniors. From pharmaceutical television commercials to films, books, and conversations with well-meaning but blind family members, the cultural narrative is unyielding. It dictates that you must find a partner so you do not end up alone in an empty room. This relentless messaging creates a deep psychological state of artificial scarcity and fear, causing many older adults to entirely compromise their financial boundaries. Ignore massive and glaring red flags, tolerate toxic behavior, and accept highly suboptimal relationship terms simply to avoid a perceived socially constructed stigma. But the empirical data on human happiness shows that the most toxic, soul-crushing form of loneliness is never the objective state of being physically alone in a quiet, peaceful house. The most destructive, biologically damaging loneliness in existence is the profound, suffocating isolation you experience when you're sitting directly across the dining room table from a romantic partner who does not truly understand you, who systematically drains your financial resources, who limits your personal freedom, and who views you as a source of labour, stability, or financial security, rather than a true sovereign equal. The mature individual who courageously embraces intentional singlehood eliminates this catastrophic risk entirely. Their home is not an empty, lonely void. It is a highly secured, sacred sanctuary. It is a controlled space where the emotional climate is perfectly managed by them, where there is zero unpredictable domestic drama, where there are no psychological power games, and where your nervous system can actively, deeply recover from the decades of professional stress, economic anxiety, and social noise endured during your working years. When we perform a rigorous, comprehensive audit of all available data, directly comparing the long-term financial, physical, and psychological metrics of late-life romance versus intentional solitude, the logical and rational conclusion is completely undeniable. For a mature adult between the ages of 55 and 75, the return on investment for traditional romantic relationships and shared domestic arrangements is extraordinarily unfavourable. The risks are mathematically catastrophic, including the permanent loss of 50% or more of your accumulated net worth in family courts, the total destruction of your geographic mobility, the exposure of your estate to multi-generational litigation, and a staggering 63% increase in mortality risk if you are forced into an intensive, late-stage caregiving role for an ailing partner. The rewards of late-life dating, by contrast, are often highly fleeting, temporary, and can be completely replicated through high-quality friendships, deep community engagement, professional networks, and profound personal interests without ever surrendering your legal sovereignty, your financial independence, or your spatial autonomy. Choosing singlehood in your 60s and 70s is not a sign of emotional defeat, social isolation, or psychological brokenness. When viewed through the lens of data, it is a highly sophisticated, data-driven protective strategy for long-term survival, asset preservation, and self-actualization. It is the rational recognition that your tree wealth, your physical health, your mental clarity, and your remaining years of active life are precious, finite resources that must be fiercely, unapologetically protected from unnecessary risk and emotional volatility. It is an act of supreme intelligence and self-respect to look objectively at the modern dating market, evaluate the structural liabilities, calculate the risk-to-reward ratio, and decide that the most valuable, high-yielding investment you can make during your golden years is an investment entirely and exclusively in yourself. You have already spent 3 or 4 decades serving a corporate economic system, providing financially for a family, navigating the complex demands of others, and meeting the heavy expectations of society. You have fully earned the absolute right to own your time completely, protect your assets fiercely, manage your own space, and enjoy a life of profound, uncompromised, and beautiful relief.